Every modern army needs a few key things. Its infantry, its artillery, its heavy combat vehicles, its medics and quartermasters, and its special operators. But all those soldiers, no matter how capable or however fearsome, cannot wage war without one critical missing piece: supplies. Without food, without ammunition, without medicine, any army will eventually be forced to surrender. And if an army wants to avoid that fate, then it's going to need a workhorse behind the front lines. It's not a glamorous job, but it's an essential one. And in the Second World War, it's a job that the Dodge WC series of trucks filled seamlessly. Whether they were being used as cargo trucks, command cars, ambulances, panel vans, or even traveling armories, the WC series performed the thankless task of keeping Americans and Allied troops in the fight. As the proverbial atlas that held up an entire war effort, the WC trucks, affectionately known as beeps by their operators, became the linchpin for an eventual Allied victory. In today's video, we're going to take a deep dive into the beeps, their developments, their deployments, and their legacy as World War II's great unsung heroes. When mechanized military vehicles burst onto the scene during World War I, every nation on Earth was treated to a demonstration of their potential. Tanks and armored trucks could wreak havoc on the battlefield, but motorized vehicles could also supply and reinforce troops far better than draft animals ever could. Even before the war began, the United States had reached out to manufacturer Dodge, whose first car, the Model 3035, was made to be more durable and resistant than the Ford Model T. Today, let me tell you about our fantastic sponsor, Keeps, the online subscription service that helps men keep their hair. Unlike me, it's too late for me. So Keeps is not just any ordinary subscription service. It offers clinically proven treatments to combat the symptoms of hair loss. And the best part, these treatments are delivered straight to your door, plus they're typically half the cost of what you find at a pharmacy. So more affordable, more convenient, perfect. Why wouldn't you? With Keeps, you don't need to worry about visiting a doctor's office or a pharmacy. All their treatment plans are recommended by licensed medical providers, and like I say, they come right to you. This having quality, expert care in the comfort of your home. And let's talk about the amazing support you get with Keeps. They've got a team of medical advisors, prescribers, and care specialists who are ready to help you achieve your hair goals. And get this, and each treatment plan comes with a full year of unlimited messaging, so you can connect with your medical provider whenever you need to. It's like having 24/7 care and support at your fingertips. Keeps has got you covered no matter what your hair needs are, whether you want to prevent hair loss, stimulate hair growth, or simply take better care of the hair that you have. They've even got an award-winning all-natural thickening shampoo and conditioner system to give you that extra hair boost. You can easily subscribe to Keeps to get refill reminders so you'll never run low on the products you need. Hair loss stops with Keeps. To get a special offer, head to keeps.com/megaprojects or simply click the link in the description. That's keeps.com/megaprojects. Thanks to Keeps for sponsoring, and now back to today's video. The US Army had the foresight to expect that nations who could move equipment without having to feed and rest thousands of horses would probably have a bit of a leg up in combat. So, they turned to Dodge to supply well over 12,000 cars and light trucks by the end of World War I. In this conflict, as well as during the US-Mexico border war, Dodge trucks demonstrated their ability to move in troop convoys and serve as ambulances. The Dodge company, for their half of the deal, proved that they could sustain an initiative to produce large numbers of repair kits and part replacements. Because of this track record, Dodge was the go-to for all things truck in the interwar years. In 1934, Dodge made its first four-wheel drive truck, and it was enough of a success that the Army asked for several production runs. The company offered a number of other experimental trucks to the Army as well, a couple of 1.5-ton designs and a smaller half-ton truck. These offerings were especially timely because in the mid-1930s, the US Department of War declared its World War I fleet of vehicles obsolete. Global tensions were rising again due to aggression from Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, and the Department of War was not at all confident that America could afford to drag its feet when replenishing its vehicle stocks. Dodge knew that it was the leading candidate for a large-scale production contract, and they gave the Army every indication that they were ready and eager to work when the government was ready. The Warren Truck Assembly Plant, located just north of Detroit, opened in 1938 with all the necessary tools to sustain mass production. They developed a new truck chassis to support any future models and even designed an Art Deco line of trucks, the so-called job-rated trucks that, we can only assume were extremely stylish in 1939. Now, for the Army's part, it took till 1939 just to figure out precisely what they wanted in a new truck. What they settled on was a total of 5 truck sizes to suit their purposes: a half-ton, a 1.5-ton, a 2.5-ton, a 4-ton, and a 7.5-ton. Each of them were to be similar to commercial trucks, with only light modifications required to make them ready for military use. Now, each size of truck would have its own bidding process, so a clean sweep for all of the contracts would be a bit of an uphill battle for Dodge. Instead, they focused in on their company's strengths: hard-working, utilitarian, light trucks on the smaller end of the spectrum, trucks that would undoubtedly form the backbone of the war. The first entry from Dodge was the 4x4 half-ton VC series, which were modeled after some commercial trucks that they'd already been producing. The VC was an open-cab design, one that was nimble enough to navigate difficult roadways or do a bit of off-roading while being stable enough to keep its payload from spilling. The Army were big fans of this design, and 4,500 of the VCs were built, most of them used either as pickup transports or scout cars. When they hit active service with the military, the VCs were a major hit, and even though a lighter quarter-ton Jeep would fill a lot of the VC niches when it was introduced, the Army still ordered tens of thousands of a production line version of the VC. This evolution, known as the half-ton WC, would be the start of Dodge's W generation of trucks, a term which would come to mean every truck of this particular generation, regardless of its size. The half-ton WC was also built in 38 variants, some of which included thousands of copies, while others just included a handful. Because of Dodge's ability to mass-produce these trucks, they were able to get over 77,000 copies into the Army's hands by early 1942, the vast majority of which were available before Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941. Without these trucks becoming available when they did, the US might have had a much tougher time entering the war. After all, they were the only light 4x4 trucks that the Army had at the time. The next contract Dodge tried to claim was the 1.5-ton, and when it churned out 6,500 copies of its so-called VF401, it was hard for the Army to be anything but appreciative. Most of the trucks in this series were closed-cab, open beds. As an example, imagine your standard Dodge pickup truck of today. A smaller number were built as dump trucks. They were built for cross-country travel, capable of handling heavy-duty military equipment, and it was equipped with a power winch, ideal for fishing other, less capable trucks out of the mud. 3 experienced ambulance units were built from the 1.5-ton design, although production of those units did not continue. This time, even despite Dodge's massive procurements on their own dime, the Army decided to award a contract to Chevrolet. So Dodge moved to 1 win and 1 loss where contracts were concerned. But Dodge would shelve the design and keep an eye on it. And, well, that was absolutely going to come in handy later. So as time went on, Dodge began to produce more and more trucks in more and more varieties in order to meet the full scope of need that the US military could conceive of. In 1941, the Army's Quartermaster Corps directly solicited Dodge for a 3/4-ton truck, a heavier duty model that could more easily be mass-produced with the materials that were available at the time. The WC series 3/4-tonner seated 8 troops inside and could use 80% of the parts that the half-ton truck had relied on, meaning that Dodge didn't have to create a new supply chain. Dodge would end up producing 255,000 3/4-ton trucks as the Army's sole manufacturer, with variants including ambulances, weapons bays, radio command, and troop transporters. In 1943, the Army had the need for yet another truck size, after changing the layout of the Army infantry from using 8-man squads to 12-man squads. This meant the 3/4-ton was no longer large enough to carry a full squad in one unit. The new variant Dodge produced was a 1.5-ton truck, which basically kept the layout of the 3/4-ton but added on a second pair of rear wheels and stretched the chassis another few feet. Dodge also took the opportunity to reinforce the chassis, but by keeping the rest of the truck mostly mechanically uniform with the 3/4-ton, Dodge yet again avoided a range of potential maintenance and supply issues. In addition to saving the Army all of that trouble, it allowed Dodge to produce the entire line of trucks quicker and easier. And even despite the Army's choice to solicit their original 1.5-ton truck from Chevrolet, Dodge still managed to get in on the game. Now, it's important to put into perspective just how massive of an achievement this was, not just for the Dodge Corporation, but for the American automotive industry in general. It was all well and good that Dodge had managed to pick up some big military contracts, but far more important, Dodge demonstrated that a company could use a common, utilitarian, high-quality platform in order to create a wide range of designs and variants. The WC series included 52 different models of truck by the time its production run ended, all using the same core design, most of the same parts, and being roughly uniform to operate. At the time, no other auto manufacturer had even attempted anything close, let alone achieved it. But this approach to manufacture would set a standard that the entire industry would eventually try and replicate. So, Well, what were those common specifications? Every half-tonner in the WC series used the same 116-inch wheelbase, with the exception of the ambulance variant, and every one of them used the same tires, the same brake systems, the same 6-cylinder side valve engine, the same transmission, and the same transfer case. From there, they could be made into high-sitting boxy ambulances, enclosed carry-all vehicles, radio recon cars, command trucks, and open cab models that could mount automatic rifles, machine guns, or anti-tank guns in the back. The 3/4-ton models and 1.5-ton models all shared the same two options for a wheelbase, the same wide tires, and the same squared-off appearance up front, with items like the grille, hood, and windshield all interchangeable. So too was the engine. Again, this allowed Dodge to just plop whatever it needed on the back of the trucks while ensuring that regular boxes of pre-sorted replacement parts would usually be enough to keep any of the variants in service. Alongside its popular variants, Dodge and the Army experimented with a couple more out-of-pocket designs for the WC series. An amphibious version, known as the Aqua Cheetah, was put together with the help of the Amphibian Car Corporation, with the hopes that it might be used in the D-Day landings and the many island-to-island operations of the Pacific Theater. Another prototype, this one heavily armored and meant to drive through direct enemy fire, was also put together. However, neither were adopted for service, and unlike the quarter-ton Willys MB Jeep, the WC series supported only a limited number of other modifications once a truck left the factory. Over the course of World War II, over 380,000 WC series trucks were provided to the Allies. Of those, tens of thousands had already been produced during those critical 2 years when hostilities had broken out in Europe and China, but the US had not yet entered the war. The American Lend-Lease program, in which food, oil, and other material was supplied to other Allied nations to feed the war effort, ended up being a perfect place for many of those WCs to be used. The Soviet Union, in particular, got about 25,000, which they found to be a massive improvement on anything they were equipped with at that time. The British, the Free French, and the Chinese received major shipments as well. Eventually, over a dozen countries would get their own WC trucks, many of which were used to great effect during the war. And once the United States got into the fight, it was all but guaranteed that where American GIs went, the Dodge trucks followed behind. Trusted by the troops that used them, dependable in a crisis, and capable of hauling heavy equipment through just about any terrain, the WC series could be spotted almost all the way up to the front lines anywhere there was a battle to be fought. Although the trucks were somewhat less effective during the island hopping and jungle warfare of the Pacific Theater, they saw heavy use in the major land battles of the Pacific, and were crucial in European and North African exchanges, especially during fast-moving, dynamic offensives that heavier trucks wouldn't have been able to keep up with. No matter where they went, they were accompanied by the quarter-ton Willys MB Jeep, which earns the larger Dodge trucks the moniker of Beep, short for Big Jeep. On the home fronts and among the troops, the WC series was certainly trusted and well-liked, but it didn't receive the same sort of praise that the Willys Jeep did. Perhaps this was because of how many variants the WC series included, or because, unlike the Jeeps, they were tougher to use as farm equipment or drive around as military surplus. More likely, though, it was a reflection of the roles these big trucks were supposed to fill. They weren't meant for swashbuckling or adventure, but for making sure that Allied servicemen never faced any kinds of problems that might take their focus off the enemy. In that quiet, dependable role, the WC series of trucks functioned as the backbone of Allied supply chains, the crucial piece of equipment from which the Allies could build their presence in any theater of war. Other heavier trucks were important, yes, but these were the sort of cargo trucks that depended on roads, cleaned up off-road paths, and secured supply routes in order to function. The WC series, though, was everywhere, and it was these Dodge trucks that could lead the way for others to follow. When World War II ended, the WC series of trucks stayed in military service for a while, aiding in the reconstruction efforts in Europe and Asia as one of the best heavy-load trucks available. But with few major conflicts in those following years, the WC series didn't have much else to do, and with all the advances in engine technology and auto manufacturing that had come from the war, the Dodge trucks couldn't stay relevant for long. Some of the truck variants, especially ambulances, would remain in active service for decades, while many others were shipped off to militaries around the world or sold off as surplus to civilians for farm work or construction. But by and large, the WC series exited service during the 1950s without any fanfare. Yet the lessons the US Army learned from the WC series would endure long after the Dodge trucks left active military service. Their layout and platform were the basis for the M37 series of trucks, which would see the US through the Korean War and the early years of Vietnam, and they would inspire the civilian power wagon. The truck's common chassis, parts interchangeability, and modular design would be a guiding light for the US in the 1980s, when those same principles would be used in the Humvee. That design would phase out the idea of light, super light, and medium-sized military trucks, replacing them with a single machine that could be modified to fit any role. These days, a WC truck fetches high prices from World War II memorabilia collectors, and they can be found off-roading every once in a while, of course, with significant modern upgrades. They can be spotted on screen as an absolutely essential part of any World War II film or documentary that claims to portray the war accurately, and its legacy is referenced every once in a while by Dodge as the company continues to build its automotive empire. But otherwise, the WC series has largely faded into memory, and like so many other well-made, effective, utilitarian pieces of equipment, that's kind of the point. In its years of service, the WC series worked tirelessly to fill the needs of the Allied militaries, and in all that time, the Allies really had very few complaints. One might argue that the truck did its job so well that it simply didn't need to be given a second thought. It would be there when needed, dependable and diligent. But it's worth remembering that these trucks, the innovations in their design, and the performance they gave on the battlefield were instrumental in ensuring that the Second World War happened as it did. This quiet, determined workhorse doing a thankless task was a linchpin to the entire Allied war effort. It goes down in history as an unsung hero, but nonetheless a true hero of World War II.